taken over the city, and a decade of civil unrest had begun in the United States. This is L.A. in 1992, the city of angels again suffering a major riot. Today on Austin Faith Dialogue, we will look at a sensitive but important subject, American race relations in the 1990s. How far have we come, and how much farther do we need to go? Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs series at the crossroads of religion and life. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues in the area in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Join us now for this week's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. This magazine cover hit the newsstands a week after the recent urban unrest in Los Angeles. The Newsweek cover may have put recent events into a unique perspective. Following the recent civil unrest in Los Angeles and throughout America, many people ask an important question: has America made any progress in its quest for racial equality? It was not long ago that Martin Luther King Jr. told America that he had a dream. Today, has that dream turned into a social nightmare? Hello, I'm Richard Thompson, pastor of Central Presbyterian Church, and your host for this special edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. On this program, we will discuss the status of race relations. We will probe the issue with our guests who are currently working on finding solutions to this major social problem here in Texas. The question of race relations is not just an urban question, but a rural one as well. And just as the magazine cover implied, U.S. race relations are more than just black and white. We begin this program with a report from Roger Lotz, who looked at the central Los Angeles riots and their impact on Austin.
The not guilty verdict in this trial, the trial of 4 Los Angeles police officers charged with criminally beating a black motorist, Rodney King, resulted in this: central Los Angeles going up in flames and rioters looting and destroying local businesses. The results of this urban disaster included 54 dead, almost 2,400 injured, close to 17,000 arrests, almost 10,000 permanently lost jobs, and financial losses and expenses that will probably exceed $1 billion. And this is only from the violence in L.A. and does not include civil unrest in at least 5 other major U.S. cities. Here in Austin, religious leaders responded quickly. On May 3rd, they held a Stand for Unity rally on the steps of the state capitol. The ethnically diverse crowd condemned racism and called for renewed attempts to spur on racial justice and equality. The governor, who spoke with groups of religious leaders that day from throughout the state, also addressed the crowd with her concerns and hopes. Following the successful rally, a religious task force was formed to address the concerns of human rights and social justice. The group has also called for participation with the city manager in the selection of the City of Austin's next police chief and the establishment of an independent review board of the public defender system. The hope is to strengthen accountability of the local court system. It has been said that history repeats itself. But as the Watts riots of 1965 and the central Los Angeles riots of 1992 have warned, this kind of history should be avoided. But the question now is how.
Now joining us for a discussion of the state of race relations, not only here in Austin and Texas, but throughout the nation, are 3 persons who are part of a task force looking into this critical issue locally. Our first guest has been on the program before. He is the Reverend Sterling Lands, who is the president of the Baptist Ministers Union of Austin and vicinity. He's also very active in the community. And joining us is Reverend Marion Childress Usher, who works with United Campus Ministries on the campus of the University of Texas at Austin. Reverend Childress is a member of the United Methodist Church. Our final guest in this segment is Frank Cooksey, a former mayor of Austin. He's also the chairperson for Austin Metropolitan Ministries Commission for Racial and Ethnic Justice. And we thank you all for joining us. I think after viewing that videotape, we have a rather compelling sense of the urgency that's still with us some weeks after that urban disorder in California. And Sterling, could you give us your sense of how close we are to that kind of crisis in our own community?
Richard, we have the same evils that have perplexed us for the last 100 years or so, and that is racism, poverty, and violence. They're ever before us. You still have more people that are underclass or are poor. You have individuals who are without hope as it relates to the employment situation in this country. There are enough people in our communities that are unemployed that do not report or do not call for unemployment benefits, that the government basically has discounted them as being non-existent, and these people feel that there is no way for them to become part of the system. Whenever you push individuals into that level of deprivation, you're going to get some sort of a negative or violent outbreak, because as far as they're concerned, they have nothing anyway. So I think that we are at the state right now where any event that would cause an emotional eruption could cause these individuals to stand up and be prepared to die because they already see themselves as being not alive.
Mm-hmm. So as the Rodney King verdict was the precipitating incident in Los Angeles, something locally could ignite a tinderbox for those who have nothing to lose as it is.
Well, the Rodney King incident, really, a verdict was not really the triggering mechanism as from where I stand. I believe that the triggering mechanism was the disdainment which the justice system seemed to have toward the minority community in general, and more specifically as it relates to how they treated Rodney King, one, and two, how they treated the four officers who beat him so unmercifully and inhumane. And then third, of course, the fact that they were acquitted. Now, if you take all three of those items and put them together, I think that they become the trigger that says that here are people who are non-people. Let's show them that they're non-people. And these non-people decided to say that's just not the way it's going to be.
I see. Okay, well, I think that we're going to have reason to come back throughout our discussion here to some of the underlying causes, the underclass, the treating people as non-persons. But I think we need, Frank, as the former mayor of the community, I've been interested to see how Austin Metropolitan Ministries and the Baptist Association have given focus to the relations with the police department here in town. Why is that the case? And what business does the church have talking about police relations?
Well, I think the church has every reason. The churches and synagogues in Austin are interested in justice and mercy, and these are themes that are within the context of the Judeo-Christian tradition and the ethical values that underlie that tradition. And what we're trying to do is to infuse those values into the decision-making process here in Austin, so that when a police chief is chosen, for example, that we are concentrating on issues of justice and mercy and treating people as persons, which Reverend Land discussed. The antithesis of that is to not treat them as persons and to treat them as things, and what results is a riot that comes out of frustration and anger and bitterness.
Well, now, could you just share with us for a moment about the selection of a police chief that is currently underway in the city? How that's done, and what input could the religious community make in that regard?
Well, the religious community, of course, will have their input along with a lot of other institutions and groups in Austin. But what we've asked Camille Barnett, who's our city manager and the key person in this whole decision-making process, to do is to meet with us and hear us. And I think she started out on a very good foot by disseminating a questionnaire to a number of groups in the community to get their ideas. We're going to be meeting with her personally and giving her some input on a personal basis as well.
Okay, well, I think that the input of the religious community in regard to this particular decision is, if we can see that in a broader sense, Marion. I know that you have, as a pastor at the University of Texas, representing a variety of denominations, have had occasion, since you've been in Austin now, how long?
2 years.
Okay, and during that time, what's been your perception of race relations on campus and in the community?
Race relations on campus have been pretty strained, to say the very least. African American students on campus that I've talked to, many of them, have been quite angry at what they perceive to be real insensitivity on the part of the administration. Not to mention the racist incidents that occurred, perpetrated by fraternities on campus that just sort of, ignited tremendous outpouring of anger and rage, and I'm sure some grief that here at a place like the University of Texas, an institution of higher learning, a place where you really expect to find much more openness, much more inclusiveness, a greater caring about all of the pieces that make up this wonderful mosaic which the University of Texas represents, there would be a great deal more sensitivity, and to find that that's not the case has been pretty painful, I think, for a lot of the minority students that attend there. So that's a real ongoing issue. Over the course of the year and a half that I've been at the University of Texas, as a part of an effort proffered by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries, I participated in a conversation with students in one of the offending fraternities, where we had a chance to talk about and tell them about what it felt like, what it feels like to have racial slurs hurled at you and to be the object of discrimination and racial hostility. And I've done that twice, both times with the same fraternity. I participated as an observer primarily with the Alpha Kappa Alpha fraternity, an African American fraternity on campus that sponsored what they called a Week of Hope, in an effort to, draw students together, to help them see that, they're all in this together, that there is a way through the resistance and the hard attitudes and feelings that they've encountered.
So this is an attempt to get into a person-to-person communication and go beyond stereotypes
by all means.
to break through some of this strain, as you described it, on the campus. And I think that in the local community, Sterling, isn't the thought to do this with congregations? What's the plan there?
There are a number of discussions that are going on, and of course one of the chief discussions have to do with partnering or having congregations have cross services, and by and large I think that is going to do some very positive things in the entire church community. But there are perhaps greater issues and greater opportunities in front of us, and it has nothing to do with whether we partner or not. It has to do with the sincerity of each individual who address this issue, whether or not their motivations are from a position of wanting to do the right thing the right way for the right reason to benefit their sisters and brothers and glorify God according to His Word. And that becomes an area that we are unable to judge, you see, because all we can see are the fruits. We can see the results of that, but we don't necessarily know a person's motives when they first get into it. There's been a lot of talk, there's a lot of hoopla going on. Everybody's coming to the center stage trying to find where the spotlight is and taking a bow saying what we ought to do about race relations. Well, 30 years ago when I was involved in marching out on the streets in the 60s, I remember these same things. I saw the same type people coming up saying what they were going to do and what we should do, and everyone wanted to define our problem, tell us what our solution should be, and then mediate for us how to get this problem solved. We started out looking for equality and equity and justice in the system, and we got desegregation and integration, which had brought us not equality, nor equity, nor justice, and that is shown to us in the Los Angeles incident. And I think that that's only typical of what goes on across this country. So the churches could be the forefront, should lead the vanguard in saying this is what real equity is, this is what real equality is, this is what real justice is.
Okay, well, I think that back after the Watts riots, there was an attempt by the churches to say this is what equity and justice is.
I think so.
But, you know, what's, to paraphrase or quote exactly, I guess, Yogi Berra, deja vu all over again. What's going to keep this 20 years from now? You know, same kind of thing happening, looking back at this point in time and saying there was another outbreak, but nothing basically has been done since. What's going to happen to keep it from just being a vicious cycle repeatedly?
Well, I'll tackle that very briefly. It seems to me that in this area, what you have to do as a person of faith and person with a core of values that stress the importance and the sacredness of human life and the importance and sacredness of the personality before God is to do the best you can in the context where you are. And this is what I would charge the people of Austin who are watching this program to do. Get involved in some area where you can make a contribution.
All right, you're talking about it from the individual perspective.
From an individual perspective. And I would have to say that the history of mankind and the human race indicates that we're going to continue to have problems like this.
All right.
And the church, the synagogues, are the yeast, the leaven that work in society to try to mitigate those dark tendencies in the human spirit that try to take over from generation to generation. Okay. And I wouldn't be surprised if a generation from now we weren't working with some problem like this. It may not be exactly relations between the blacks and the whites in America, but it might be.
Well, let's just assume, though, that if we come out of the Judeo-Christian perspective that says history is not just inevitable repetition of past mistakes and sins, that you can make progress, you can move forward.
Yes.
And that if we're to do that now, I mean, for instance, I know AMM has talked about jobs for youth.
Yes.
Soon.
Yes.
I mean, the matter of helping to review set up a review board for the police or to relate to the public defender's office, that is longer term kind of thing, but it also speaks of more immediate response.
Richard, there are at least 3 items that come to my mind immediately. One is that the summer is up on us. We have hundreds of African-American youth that are unemployed, and they have no hope of employment. Now, there are people who are even watching this program this morning, or today, that have opportunities that they could make available. That's one way of turning it around. Secondly, a police review board with subpoena power is very important to a community. We need to have perhaps single districts for electing judges so that we have a better representation across the board. The public defender system as it relates to having competency at that level, and I don't mean to say that anyone is incompetent, but I mean bringing in experience and expertise. That's a way of turning it around. But more importantly, if the heart is not changed, then man is not going to change anything, because changed people change conditions. Conditions will not change based on programs. We need a change of heart. This is a spiritual matter. It cannot be resolved using political, social, or any of the other higher echelons of academia to solve it. It's a spiritual issue, and we have to deal with the man's heart first. Of course, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but that's the bottom line.
Well, preaching like this is just an occupational hazard for both of us.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
And for you too, Mary.
I guess I'd like to say that I see the solution as including a number of pieces. Certainly it is a spiritual problem, but if the heart is changed, but the life around them isn't changed, it seems to me that we're still in the same boat. One of the things that has continued to speak to my heart is the need for our churches, our people in the pews, to get serious about folks in the street.
Okay.
To get serious in ways that draw them out of their sort of cocoons, their comfortable places. And I'm talking about parishioners and pastors in the black community.
Well, I think this adds to what we've said in terms of looking at the congregation as a social force in addition to the individual's response and faith. We'll be right back with more of our discussion of the current state of race relations, and when we come back, we'll be joined by a member of Governor Ann Richards' staff. We'll discover what role the state hopes to play in bringing communities together.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
We're back, and we're now joined by the Deputy Chief of Staff to Governor Ann Richards, Carl Ritchie, who's credited for organizing the governor's meeting with state religious leaders following the Los Angeles riots. As we come to this segment, before we visit Mr. Ritchie, let's have just a moment to take a look at perspective at Texas racial makeup, with a little less than 2/3 of the folks being white, 11% black, and Hispanic 26%. Can you give us a sense of what that means in regard to the work that you do with the governor, and how that this follow-up with the civil disorder in California, and what that means for us in Texas?
As it relates to that, what we always try to do is try to make sure that whatever we do in state government, that it is reflective of the population, because you have to bring people of all backgrounds into the discussion, regardless on what issue it is. As it relates to the LA incident, what we try to do is bring religious leaders from around the state of different denominations, of different ethnic backgrounds, in to talk to the governor about what took place in LA and what we can do here in the state of Texas to avoid a similar incident. The governor is very aware that what took place in LA could have easily happened in Houston or Nacogdoches or Longview or Dallas or any other community in the state of Texas. And what we want to do is find ways to prevent that. And to that end, the governor convened a meeting of approximately 40 or more religious leaders around the state to come in and discuss issues with her. And from that meeting, the governor committed to identify and marshal all the resources that the state had available to it to maximize employment opportunities for youth at risk in the form of a summer jobs program. And in addition to that, we also agreed to look at nonviolent conflict resolution training programs for key state agency personnel that are involved in contact with the general public in a law enforcement capacity. What we're doing is looking at those types of programs, and we will make those available to those various agencies and ask them to give some consideration about maybe implementing those programs.
Well, one of the things that I think is important to maybe take note of while the precipitating incident in California is so fresh on our minds is how it wasn't just a matter of black and white. In the particular part of Los Angeles, it was included Hispanics, it included whites who were looting. I mean, it was across the board as far as the civil disorder was concerned. And I think there has been a tendency to see it as almost exclusively a black and white issue. And I think by gathering people of different ethnic groups, I'm implying that the governor is saying, look, we're all in this together. We need to solve it together. We have contributed to it together.
That's correct.
Fair?
The governor sees this as it's just not a problem that is germane to one particular community. There are a number of people in all different communities who have been given this hope that if you go out and you work hard, you get an education, there are opportunities for you. And in many cases, it's sort of been a false hope, because when people go out and they've done what they've been told to do, there is no real hope. There is no opportunity out there for them. And that's just not limited to blacks or to Hispanics. I mean, that's everybody. We have a growing group of individuals who have come up through the ranks, have been promised a lot of things, and they have found they're false promises. What we have to do is provide real opportunities for people. We have to come together as a group and knock down these barriers that separate us. As the governor has traveled across the state, she is very disturbed with what she sees when she goes into schoolrooms, that there are kids who have barriers that they have placed in front of them, barriers that deal with race, barriers that deal with economic status. There are a number of them. But the only way you can knock down those barriers is for everybody to communicate. Because yes, there are some differences between individuals, but those differences does not mean that one individual is better than the other.
Right. Well, you know, I was struck at that rally over the state capitol where she spoke, and she made mention of visiting the schools throughout the state and seeing in the eyes of some of the minority students, and I think maybe she was even talking about in some of the among the students of any race who were in underprivileged conditions, a sense of hopelessness and a kind of a blank stare kind of thing that made her, I think it resulted in her feeling even more of an impetus to not let this crisis come and pass without acting on it.
Right, because what she sees is she goes into a classroom and she sees a little kid who may be white, who may be black or Hispanic, or who may be Asian, and they have a sleepy, tired look in their eyes. And what you know is that child has not got the proper rest, has not had the proper nutrition.
Right.
And the question is, why is that?
Okay, what about the money? How are we going to find the money, both state-wise, locally, nationwide, to deal with this crisis?
What we're going to do is try to spend existing funds in a very prudent manner. I don't think that you can just throw money at a problem like this, because this is more than just something that you can to buy away with.
So can you do it without money?
I don't think you can do it without money. I think you have to have some money to plant the seeds for opportunities. You have to have money to provide skills, provide training, to provide jobs, to give people an impetus that they can do something and they can make a difference. One of the things that we're going to do through the Summer Youth Program is to have a program in Houston, a pilot program called the Governor's Clean Machine. And in that program, we will take at-risk youth of all nationalities and basically have them go in and do community improvement projects to give them a sense of pride in their community, to help them build that up, and then so they can make a difference and feel good about themselves. And then a part of that will have individuals come in and giving some training about self-esteem to help them build up the self-esteem so they can have hope.
Well, you've helped us build up our understanding on this subject, and we want to thank you for being here today.
And thank you for having me.
I'd like to thank all of our guests, the Reverend Sterling Lands, Marion Childress Usher, Frank Cooksey, and Carl Ritchie from Governor Richard's office. And I'd like to thank you folks for joining us today, and be with us again next week for our next edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. Peace be with you.